The morning Catherine Brennan discovered her jewelry box empty was the same morning she realized Thomas Whitmore had never loved her at all. She stood in the boarding house room they had shared for 3 months, staring at the velvet-lined box that had held her mother's sapphire earrings, her grandmother's pearl necklace, and the delicate gold locket her father had given her before he died. Everything was gone. Every single piece. On the dresser lay a hastily scrawled note in Thomas's unsteady hand. "Forgive me. I had no choice." That was all. No explanation of where he had gone, no promise to return, just those 5 words that shattered what remained of her foolish heart. Catherine sank onto the narrow bed, her hands trembling as she clutched the empty box. She was 23 years old, stranded in Tombstone, Arizona territory in the spring of 1882 with barely enough money for next week's rent and no family to turn to. She had followed Thomas here from St. Louis 6 months ago, believing his promises of marriage and a fresh start. He had spoken so sweetly of building a life together, of the opportunities waiting in the Western territories. She had ignored her aunt's warnings, sold her few possessions, and boarded the train west with stars in her eyes and her jewelry box tucked safely in her carpet bag. The jewelry had been all she had left of her family. Her parents had died of fever when she was 19, leaving her with little but those precious pieces. Thomas had known what they meant to her. She had told him the stories behind each item, how her father had worked extra shifts at the factory to buy her mother those sapphire earrings for their 10th anniversary. How the pearl necklace had been passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. He had listened and nodded and held her hand, and she had believed he understood. Catherine pressed her palm against her mouth to stifle a sob. She had been such a fool. Thomas had been charming and handsome with his dark eyes and easy smile, but she should have noticed the signs. The way he disappeared for hours without explanation. The nervous energy that consumed him whenever certain men passed them on the street, the smell of whiskey that grew stronger each week. She had told herself it was just the adjustment to frontier life, that he would settle down once he found steady work. But Thomas had never wanted steady work. He wanted quick money and easier paths, and apparently he had found neither. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Brennan?" The boarding house owner's voice carried through the thin wood. "Your rent's due tomorrow, just reminding you." "Yes, Mrs. Fletcher. Thank you." Catherine's voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. She heard the woman's footsteps retreat down the hallway. Tomorrow. She had enough for 1 more week, and then what? She could look for work, but respectable positions for single women were scarce in a town like Tombstone. She had some education, could read and write well, manage accounts. Perhaps someone needed help in their shop or office. The alternative was unthinkable. Catherine stood and walked to the small mirror above the wash basin. She looked tired, her green eyes red-rimmed, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. She splashed cold water on her face and tried to compose herself. Falling apart would accomplish nothing. She needed a plan. She spent the rest of the day searching for work. The general store did not need help. The newspaper office had no openings. The school teacher position had been filled months ago. By evening, her feet ached and her hope had worn thin. She was walking back toward the boarding house when she passed a jewelry shop on Allen Street. Something made her stop and peer through the window. There, displayed prominently on a black velvet cushion, were her mother's sapphire earrings. Catherine's heart seized. She pushed through the door before she could think better of it, the bell above jangling harshly. A thin man with spectacles looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you, miss?" "Those earrings," Catherine pointed with a shaking finger. "In the window. Where did you get them?" The jeweler's expression grew wary. "I purchased them fair and square, miss. I have a receipt." "From whom? A man named Thomas Whitmore?" "I don't give out information about my clients." The jeweler crossed his arms. "If you are accusing me of something improper, I assure you everything I do is legal and documented." "Those are my earrings," and Catherine's voice broke. They were my mother's. He had no right to sell them. They were stolen from me." "Did you report the theft to the marshal?" Catherine faltered. She had not. What would she say? That the man she had been living with in sin had taken her belongings? That would only damage her reputation further, and Thomas was likely long gone by now anyway. "Please," she said instead, desperation bleeding into her words. "How much do you want for them? I will find a way to pay you." The jeweler's expression softened slightly. "Miss, I paid $40 for those earrings. They are worth more, but the gentleman who sold them was clearly in need of quick cash. I can sell them to you for $50, which is still below their true value." $50 might as well have been $500. Catherine felt tears threatening again. "I do not have that much. I do not have anything close to that." "Then I am sorry, but I cannot help you." The jeweler did not sound unkind, merely practical. "I have a business to run." Catherine nodded numbly and turned to leave. As she reached the door, the jeweler called after her. "If it helps, miss, there were other pieces too. A pearl necklace and a gold locket. I sold them yesterday to a rancher from out near the Dragoon Mountains. He did not say why he wanted them, just paid in cash and left." The information was worse than knowing nothing. Someone else owned her grandmother's pearls now. Someone who had no connection to her family, no understanding of what those pieces meant. Catherine walked out into the evening air, feeling hollowed out completely. She could not afford dinner that night. She lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about Thomas and how thoroughly he had betrayed her. She must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing she knew, morning light was streaming through the thin curtains and someone was knocking on her door again. Catherine rose stiffly and opened the door to find Mrs. Fletcher standing there with an unexpected expression of curiosity on her usually stern face. "There is a gentleman downstairs asking for you, Miss Brennan, a Mr. Cole Hastings. Says it is important." Catherine had no idea who Cole Hastings was. "Did he say what he wants?" "No, but he looks respectable enough. He's waiting in the front parlor." Catherine quickly pinned up her hair and smoothed her dress, her mind racing through possibilities. Perhaps Thomas had sent someone? But why would he do that after leaving the way he had? She descended the stairs with trepidation and entered the small parlor where visitors were received. The man who stood when she entered was tall, probably around 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin and dark blonde hair that looked recently trimmed. He wore clean but well-worn clothes, a rancher by the look of him, and he held his hat in his hands with an almost nervous energy. His eyes were a striking blue, and when they met hers, Catherine saw something in them she could not quite identify, concern, perhaps, or determination. "Miss Brennan?" His voice was deep and quiet. "Thank you for seeing me. My name is Cole Hastings. I own a ranch east of here. Mrs. Fletcher said you had something important to discuss with me, Mr. Hastings. I confess I cannot imagine what that might be. We have never met." "No, we have not." Cole Hastings cleared his throat. "This is going to sound strange, but please hear me out. 2 days ago I was in town, and I happened to be in the jewelry shop on Allen Street. I overheard a jeweler mention that a man had come in desperate to sell several valuable pieces. He described them: sapphire earrings, a pearl necklace, and a gold locket. The jeweler seemed troubled by it, said the man looked like he was running from something." Catherine felt her cheeks flush. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because yesterday I was back in town and I saw you leave that same jewelry shop. You looked devastated. I asked the jeweler about it afterward, and he told me you had claimed those earrings were yours, that they had been stolen from you. He would not give me your name, but I saw you earlier today walking near the boarding house, and Mrs. Fletcher confirmed your identity when I inquired." Catherine's embarrassment turned to confusion and then a flicker of something like hope, though she tried to suppress it. "Mr. Hastings, I appreciate your concern, but I do not understand why you are involving yourself in my affairs." Cole Hastings met her gaze directly. "Because I bought the pearl necklace and the gold locket, and this morning I went back and purchased the sapphire earrings as well." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Catherine gripped the back of a nearby chair. "Why would you do that?" Because they are yours. He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Because whoever sold them had no right to, and because I could not stand the thought of you losing pieces that clearly meant something to you. Catherine stared at him, unable to form words. This made no sense. Strangers did not do things like this. There had to be a catch, some expectation or demand that would follow. What do you want from me, Mr. Hastings? Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe. Nothing, Miss Brennan. I want nothing from you. I just wanted to return what belongs to you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He set it on the table between them and stepped back. Catherine approached slowly, her hands shaking as she unwrapped the fabric. There they were, all 3 pieces. Her mother's sapphires catching the morning light, the pearls glowing softly, the locket, dented slightly on one corner but still beautiful, still hers. A sob escaped her before she could stop it. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I do not understand, she whispered. This must have cost you so much money. It does not matter. Cole's voice was gentle. They are yours. But why? Catherine looked up at him through her tears. You do not even know me. Cole was quiet for a moment, and Catherine saw him struggle with something. Finally, he spoke. 5 years ago, I was engaged to be married. Her name was Sarah. 2 weeks before the wedding, she died of pneumonia. Before she got sick, her brother had stolen a ring that belonged to her, our grandmother's ring, and sold it to pay his gambling debts. I searched for months but never found it. I know what it feels like to lose something that connects you to the people you have loved. I could not get Sarah's ring back, but I could do this for you, so I did. Catherine felt her heart crack open. This man, this stranger, had suffered his own loss, and instead of becoming bitter, he had chosen to help her. I am so sorry about Sarah, she said softly, and I am sorry about the ring. Thank you. Cole's smile was sad. I just wanted you to have your jewelry back, Miss Brennan. That is all. He moved toward the door, preparing to leave, and Catherine felt a sudden panic. Wait. He turned back, and she frantically tried to think of what to say. I cannot just accept this. It is too much. Please, let me repay you somehow. There is no need. There is every need. Catherine stepped forward. What you have done is extraordinarily kind, but I cannot be in debt to you for such a sum. It would not be right. Cole studied her for a long moment. Are you looking for work, Miss Brennan? The question caught her off guard. I am, actually. I have been searching but have found nothing suitable yet. I need someone to manage the books for my ranch. My previous bookkeeper, an older gentleman named Albert, passed away last month, and I have been struggling to keep up with the accounts myself. I am better with cattle than numbers. The position would include room and board in a separate cottage on the property and a salary of $20 a month. If you are interested, you could work off what I spent on the jewelry and then continue on with wages after that. It would take about 4 months to clear the debt. Catherine's mind whirred. It was a solution, an answer to her immediate problems. But something about it felt too convenient. Mr. Hastings, I appreciate the offer, but I do not want charity disguised as employment. His expression turned serious. It is not charity, Miss Brennan. I genuinely need help with the books. They are a mess. I can show you if you do not believe me, and having someone competent managing the accounts would save me considerable time and probably money, too. You would be doing me a service. And the cottage? Is that standard? Albert lived there for 3 years. It is small but comfortable. It would not be proper for you to stay in the main house, and I assume you understand that. My foreman, Jack, and 2 of the ranch hands live in the bunkhouse. The cook, an older woman named Rosa, has her own room off the kitchen. Everything would be respectable and appropriate. Catherine wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him because her options were running out fast. May I think about it? Of course. Cole pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. This has the direction to the ranch. If you decide you are interested, come out any time in the next few days. I will show you the operation and you can decide if it suits you." He left then, and Catherine was alone with her jewelry and a head full of confused thoughts. She examined each piece carefully, making sure they were truly hers and undamaged. Everything was there, everything intact. Cole Hastings had spent a fortune to return them to her and wanted nothing in return except possibly her bookkeeping services. It did not make sense, and yet it was the only option that did make sense. She could not stay at the boarding house much longer. She had no family to turn to. Working at Cole's ranch would solve her immediate problems and allow her to repay him with dignity. It would be hard work, certainly, and living on a remote ranch would be isolating. But Catherine had survived worse. She had survived losing her parents, being betrayed by Thomas, and having everything stolen from her. She could survive keeping books for a kind rancher who had given her back her most precious possessions. The next morning, Catherine packed her few belongings into her carpet bag, paid Mrs. Fletcher for the week, and hired a wagon to take her out to the Hastings ranch. The driver, a taciturn man who smelled of tobacco, gave her curious looks but asked no questions. They traveled for nearly 2 hours into increasingly open country, the Dragoon Mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. The land was beautiful in a harsh way, all scrub brush and rocky soil and endless sky. The ranch itself was more substantial than Catherine had expected. A sturdy 2-story house stood at the center, built from adobe and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, a barn, a bunkhouse, a stable, and what must be the cottage Cole had mentioned. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and she could see several men working with horses in a corral. Cole emerged from the barn as the wagon pulled up. He looked surprised to see her, but pleased. "Miss Brennan, you decided to come." "I did." Catherine climbed down from the wagon with her carpet bag. "If your offer still stands, I would like to accept the position." "Of course it still stands." Cole paid the wagon driver and then gestured for Catherine to follow him. "Let me show you around." He walked her through the property, pointing out the various buildings and explaining the operation. He ran about 500 head of cattle with the help of his foreman Jack and 4 ranch hands. Rosa cooked for everyone and managed the household. The ranch had been in operation for 6 years, steadily growing, and Cole spoke about it with quiet pride. He clearly loved this land and the work, even if the bookkeeping frustrated him. The cottage was small but charming, just 2 rooms with a little porch. It had a bed, a table, a stove, and a rocking chair. The windows had real glass and curtains that looked recently washed. "Rosa made sure it was ready," Cole explained. "She has been hoping I would find someone to take over the books. She said I'm terrible at them." "May I see the books now?" Catherine wanted to know what she was getting into. Cole led her to the main house and into a small office off the front hall. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out several ledgers. Catherine spent the next hour examining them, and she had to suppress a smile. Cole had not been exaggerating. The accounts were a disaster. Numbers were added incorrectly, entries were missing dates, expenses were not properly categorized. It was fixable, but it would take considerable work. "You really do need help with these," she said finally. Cole rubbed the back of his neck, looking embarrassed. "I know. I am not proud of it. Numbers just do not stick in my head the way other things do. When would you like me to start?" "Today, if you're willing. Or tomorrow, if you need time to settle in." Catherine thought about her empty room back at the boarding house, about Thomas and the jewelry and everything that had led her to this moment. "Today is fine. Let me put my things in the cottage, and I will come back and begin sorting this out." She worked through the afternoon reorganizing the ledgers and making notes about what needed to be corrected. Cole checked on her once to make sure she had everything she needed, then left her to it. Rosa brought her lunch and supper, both delicious, and chattered in a mix of English and Spanish about how glad she was to have another woman on the property. Catherine found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red, Catherine sat on the cottage porch and watched the sky change colors. She held her mother's locket in her hand, running her thumb over the engraved surface. Inside were tiny portraits of her parents, painted when they were young. She had thought she would never see these faces again. Cole Hastings had given them back to her. She did not understand him. He was not what she expected a rancher to be. He was quiet and thoughtful, spoke gently to his animals and his workers, carried grief for a lost love. He had spent a small fortune on a stranger's jewelry and asked for nothing in return except honest work. It was almost too good to be true, and Catherine's experience with Thomas had taught her to be wary of things that seemed too good. But as the days passed, she found no evidence of ulterior motives. Cole was polite and respectful, never entering the cottage without invitation, never standing too close or letting his eyes linger inappropriately. He brought her questions about the accounts and listened carefully to her explanations. He accepted her suggestions for improving the record-keeping system and praised her work. He was in every way a perfect gentleman. Catherine fell into a routine. She woke early, made coffee on the cottage stove, and went to the main house to work on the books. She broke for lunch with everyone in the big dining room, listening to the ranch hands trade stories and jokes. In the afternoon, she continued with the accounts or helped Rosa with correspondence. In the evening, she returned to the cottage and read from the small collection of books Cole had lent her. 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, Catherine was working in the office when she heard raised voices outside. She looked out the window to see a man she did not recognize arguing with Cole near the barn. The stranger was well dressed by frontier standards, with a fancy vest and polished boots. His face was red with anger. Catherine could not hear most of what was being said, but she caught fragments. Something about land boundaries and water rights. Cole's voice remained calm and level, but his posture was tense. Finally, the stranger stormed off to his horse and rode away at a gallop. Cole stood there for a moment, his shoulders tight with tension, before heading toward the house. He came into the office looking tired. "Sorry about the noise. That was Lawrence Garrett from the ranch to the north. We have been having disputes about water access. Is there anything I can do to help?" Catherine was not sure what she could offer, but she wanted to. Cole shook his head. "It is a complicated situation. He thinks I am diverting water that should flow to his property. I am not. But he will not believe me. He is threatening to take it to court. Do you have documentation? Survey records, water rights papers?" "I do, but they are old and not entirely clear. Albert used to handle all that, and after he died, I discovered he had not kept things as organized as I thought. I could look through the papers if you want. I might be able to sort out what you need for a legal case." Cole's expression softened. "Would you? That would be incredibly helpful." Catherine spent the next several days digging through old files and papers, creating an organized system of documents that proved Cole's water rights were legitimate and properly recorded. She found the original land grant, the survey maps, and correspondence from the territory office. She compiled everything into a neat file with a written summary of the key points. When she presented it to Cole, he looked at her with something close to wonder. "Catherine, this is remarkable. This is exactly what I needed. You have probably saved me thousands of dollars in legal fees." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about hearing it in his voice made her chest feel warm. "I am glad I could help. That is what you are paying me for, after all." "You are worth far more than $20 a month," Cole said seriously. "I need to increase your salary." "You do not need to do that. We had an agreement." "The agreement was for basic bookkeeping. What you have done goes far beyond that. Starting next month, I am paying you $30. Catherine wanted to argue, but she could see he had made up his mind. "Thank you, Cole." His name felt natural on her tongue, and from the way his eyes warmed, she thought he felt the same. As spring turned to early summer, Catherine found herself thinking about Cole more than was probably wise. She noticed small things about him. The way he always checked on the cattle before he checked on anything else. How he spoke Spanish with Rosa and the Mexican ranch hands with perfect fluency. The careful way he handled the horses, always patient, never rough. The sadness that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. She wondered about Sarah, the woman he had planned to marry. What had she been like? Had she loved this ranch the way Cole did? Catherine found herself jealous of a dead woman, which was ridiculous and unfair. One evening in early June, a dust storm rolled in fast from the west. Catherine had been hanging laundry behind the cottage when the wind picked up with frightening speed. She managed to grab most of the clothes before the dust hit, but by the time she reached the cottage door, she could barely see 3 feet in front of her. She stumbled inside and slammed the door against the howling wind. The storm lasted for hours. Dust seeped through every crack in the walls until Catherine could taste it. She lit a lantern and tried to read, but the noise made it hard to concentrate. When someone knocked on the door around 8 o'clock, she jumped. Cole stood on the porch, a bandana covering his nose and mouth. "Just checking that you are all right," he called over the wind. "These storms can be frightening if you're not used to them." "I am fine," Catherine called back. "Just dusty. It should pass by morning." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything, just come to the main house. Do not worry about propriety in an emergency." She thanked him, and he left. But the fact that he had checked on her in the middle of the storm touched her deeply. Later, lying in bed and listening to the wind rattle the windows, Catherine admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Cole Hastings. It was terrifying. She had been so wrong about Thomas, had trusted him completely, and been betrayed. How could she trust her judgment now? But Cole was nothing like Thomas. He was steady and reliable and kind. He did not make empty promises or disappear when things got difficult. He had bought her jewelry back without expecting anything in return. He had given her a job and treated her with respect. He mourned a woman he had lost 5 years ago with a loyalty that spoke to the depth of his heart. Catherine did not know what to do with these feelings. She could not simply declare them to Cole. What if she was wrong about him too? What if she was seeing what she wanted to see rather than what was really there? And even if she was right, what if he did not feel the same way? He had not shown any particular interest in her beyond friendship and professional appreciation. She decided to say nothing and focus on her work. But keeping her feelings hidden became increasingly difficult. When Cole smiled at her over dinner, her heart raced. When their hands accidentally touched as he passed her a document, she felt it like electricity. When he asked her opinion on ranch decisions, she felt valued in a way she never had with Thomas. In mid-June, Cole had to travel to Tucson to meet with a cattle buyer. He would be gone for 4 days. Before he left, he stopped by the office where Catherine was working. "Jack is in charge while I'm away. If you need anything, ask him or Rosa." "I will be fine," Catherine assured him. "Travel safely." "I will." He lingered in the doorway, and Catherine thought he wanted to say something more, but finally he just nodded and left. The ranch felt different without him. Catherine had not realized how much of the energy and purpose of the place came from Cole's presence. She missed seeing him at breakfast, missed their afternoon discussions about the accounts, missed the sound of his voice calling instructions to the ranch hands. On the 3rd day of his absence, a man rode up to the ranch in the late afternoon. Catherine was in the cottage when she heard Rosa calling for her urgently. She hurried out to find the older woman standing near the main house, wringing her hands. "What is wrong?" "That man?" Rosa said, pointing to a rider approaching. "I have seen him before. He's a friend of the man who sold the jewelry. I saw them together in town." Catherine's blood went cold. Thomas, or one of his associates. She watched the rider come closer, and when he was near enough to see clearly, she recognized him. His name was Peter something, and he had been at the boarding house a few times visiting Thomas. Peter dismounted and tipped his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Miss Brennan, fancy finding you out here." "What do you want, Peter?" "Just thought I would check on you. Thomas asked me to." "Thomas has no right to ask anything about me." Peter's smile was unpleasant. "He feels bad about what happened, you know. The jewelry and all. He got into some trouble with some dangerous men, had to leave town fast. He wanted me to tell you he is sorry. You can tell Thomas I do not want his apologies. Now please leave." "That is no way to treat an old friend." Peter took a step closer. "I also heard you have been living out here with that rancher. Hastings, is it? Must be a nice arrangement." The insinuation in his voice made Catherine's skin crawl. Mr. Hastings gave me a job as his bookkeeper. There is nothing improper about it. Sure, sure. Peter looked around at the ranch buildings. Place like this must be worth a good amount. Hastings must be doing well for himself. I bet he keeps cash in the house. Catherine realized with a jolt of fear where this was going. You need to leave, now. Or what? You gonna make me? Peter laughed. Thomas said you always were too proud for your own good. Jack the foreman appeared from the barn, drawn by the voices. He was a solid man in his 50s with a weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanor. Is there a problem here? Peter assessed Jack and apparently decided not to push his luck. No problem. Just leaving. He mounted his horse and looked down at Catherine. I will tell Thomas I saw you. He will be interested to know about your new situation. He rode off, and Catherine felt shaky. Rosa put an arm around her shoulders. Come inside, I will make tea. Jack followed them into the house. Who was that man? Catherine explained about Thomas and the jewelry, and how Peter was his friend. Jack's expression grew grim. Do you think they might cause trouble? I do not know. Peter seemed very interested in the ranch and whether Cole keeps money here. I will let the boys know to keep watch, Jack said, and we will make sure someone is always near the main house and your cottage. When does Cole get back? Tomorrow evening. Good. We can handle things until then. But Catherine could not shake her unease. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had brought danger to Cole's home. Thomas clearly had debts and enemies. What if he or Peter decided the ranch was an easy target? Cole had been nothing but kind to her, and now she might have put him at risk. Cole returned the following evening dusty and tired from the road. Catherine was in the office when she heard his horse, and she rushed out to meet him. The relief on her face must have been obvious because his expression immediately turned concerned. What is wrong? What happened? She told him everything about Peter's visit and the veiled threats. Cole listened with growing anger, though Catherine could tell he was trying to control it for her sake. When she finished, he said, Thank you for telling me. Jack was right to put the men on alert. We will keep watch for a while, make sure no one tries anything. I am so sorry, Cole. I never meant to bring trouble to your home. This is not your fault, Catherine. You did nothing wrong. Thomas and his friends are the problem, not you. But Catherine could not let go of her guilt. That night she lay awake in the cottage, jumping at every sound. Around midnight she heard horses, multiple horses moving fast. She got up and peered out the window to see several riders approaching the main house. Catherine did not think. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from beside the stove and ran toward the main house, shouting, Cole, someone is coming! Lights appeared in the house windows. Cole burst out the front door with a rifle in his hands, Jack and two ranch hands close behind. The riders pulled up short, clearly not expecting to be met with armed men. Peter was among them, along with Thomas and two other men Catherine did not recognize. Thomas looked terrible, thinner than she remembered, with the desperate look of a man at the end of his rope. Well, well, Cole said, his voice hard. 5 men sneaking up on a ranch in the middle of the night. That is usually called intent to rob, where I come from. We are not here to rob anyone, as Thomas said, but his voice lacked conviction. I just want to talk to Catherine. No. Cole did not move the rifle. You stole from her. You have no right to talk to her or anything else. Those were just things, Thomas said desperately. We can work something out. I can pay her back. With what? Catherine stepped forward, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. You sold my mother's jewelry to pay gambling debts, Thomas. You have no money and no honor. There is nothing to work out. Thomas's face twisted. I made a mistake, Catherine. I was desperate. Those men were going to kill me. So you stole from me instead. That was your solution. Catherine felt anger rising, hot and cleansing. You said you loved me. You promised me a future, but the moment things got difficult, you betrayed me in the worst possible way. I am sorry, Thomas said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. I am so sorry, Catherine. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me. You destroyed my trust. You took the only things I had left of my family. Catherine's voice broke, but she continued. Do you know what kept me going after you left? Cole, a complete stranger who spent his own money to buy back my jewelry and give it to me with no expectation of anything in return. He has shown me more kindness in 2 months than you did in 6. That is the difference between a real man and whatever you are. Thomas flinched as if she had struck him. One of the other men, clearly growing nervous about the rifles pointed their direction, said, Uncle Thomas, we need to go. This was a bad idea. Listen to your friend, Jack said. Ride out now and do not come back. If we see any of you on this property again, we will assume you are here to cause trouble and act accordingly. The men exchanged glances. Peter looked like he wanted to argue, but Thomas just slumped in his saddle. Let us go, he said quietly. They rode off into the darkness, and Catherine felt something inside her finally release. She had confronted Thomas, said the thing she needed to say, and he was gone. Truly gone this time. Not just physically, but emotionally. Whatever hold he had once had on her heart was broken. Cole lowered his rifle and turned to her. Are you all right? I think so. Catherine realized she was still holding the fireplace poker. She looked down at it and started to laugh, slightly hysterical. I do not know what I thought I was going to do with this. Cole smiled. You were very brave, running out here to warn us. I was terrified you would be hurt. I could not just hide in the cottage. Something passed between them then. A recognition of feelings that had been building for weeks. Cole reached out and gently took the poker from her hand. Come inside. Rosa will make coffee and we'll all calm down. They sat in the kitchen while Rosa fussed and made coffee and breakfast, even though it was the middle of the night. The ranch hands drifted back to the bunkhouse once it was clear there would be no more trouble. Jack stayed for a while, then left Cole and Catherine alone with knowing looks that made Catherine blush. I'm sorry you had to see Thomas again, Cole said quietly. That must have been painful. Actually, it was freeing. Catherine wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I got to tell him exactly what I thought of him, and I realized I do not love him anymore. I probably have not for a long time. Maybe I never really did. I loved the idea of him, the future I thought we would have, but it was all illusion. I understand that. After Sarah died, I tortured myself for years thinking I could have saved her somehow, but you cannot change the past. You can only decide what to do with the present. Catherine looked at him across the table. His hair was mussed from sleep, his shirt partially unbuttoned. He looked real and solid and completely wonderful. Cole, why did you really buy back my jewelry? He was quiet for a long moment. At first, it genuinely was because of Sarah and the ring. I saw a way to fix something that I had not been able to fix in my own life. But then I saw you, and I do not know how to explain this, but something in me just knew. I knew you were important. I knew I needed to help you. I told myself it was just about the jewelry, but I think even then I was lying to myself. What do you mean? Cole reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. I mean, I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you walk out of that jewelry shop. You looked so lost and heartbroken, and I wanted to fix it. I wanted to make everything better for you. That is why I bought the jewelry. That is why I offered you the job. Not because I am a saint, Catherine, but because I was already halfway in love with you and I wanted you in my life. Catherine's heart felt like it might burst. You should have told me. I could not. You had just been betrayed by someone you trusted. The last thing you needed was another man declaring his feelings and putting pressure on you. I wanted you to have time to heal. I wanted you to know me and trust me before I said anything. I was planning to wait months, maybe a year. You do not have to wait, Catherine squeezed his hand. I have been falling in love with you too. I tried not to. I was so afraid of being wrong again, but everything about you is right. Cole, the way you treat people, the way you care about this ranch, the way you gave me back the pieces of my past. I love you. Cole stood and pulled her up with him, and then he was kissing her. It was gentle and deep, and full of all the feelings they had been holding back. Catherine melted into him, her arms going around his neck, finally letting herself feel the joy that had been building inside her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Catherine. I know it is fast, but I know what I feel. I want you in my life forever. I want to build a future with you right here on this ranch." "Yes," Catherine whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Tombstone with Rosa, Jack, and the ranch hands as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple dress that Rosa helped her make, and she pinned her mother's sapphire earrings in her ears. Cole wore a new suit and looked so handsome that Catherine could barely concentrate on the vows. They honeymooned on the ranch, which suited them both perfectly. Catherine moved her belongings from the cottage to the main house, and they spent long evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Cole taught her to ride horses better, and she taught him to appreciate poetry. He showed her every corner of the ranch, all the places he loved, and she fell in love with the land as much as she had with the man. In August, Cole traveled to Tucson again, this time with Catherine. They stayed in a hotel and attended the theater and ate at restaurants, and Catherine felt like she was discovering a whole new world. On their last evening there, Cole took her to a jewelry shop. "I want to buy you something new," he explained. "Something that is just from me to you, not recovered from the past, but created for our future." He bought her a delicate silver bracelet engraved with a pattern of desert flowers. Catherine cried when he clasped it around her wrist, overwhelmed by the symbolism. Her old jewelry represented her past, her family, where she had come from. This bracelet represented her future, her new family, where she was going. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Catherine managed all the accounts and correspondence, freeing Cole to focus on the cattle and land. She worked with Rosa to improve the household, ordering supplies and managing the budget. She got to know the ranch hands and their families, learning everyone's stories. She felt needed and valued in a way she never had before. In October, Lawrence Garrett came back, this time without hostility. The water rights documentation Catherine had compiled had proven his case was baseless, and he had grudgingly accepted defeat. He even apologized in his way and proposed a neighborly agreement about sharing resources during droughts. Cole accepted graciously, and Catherine was proud of how he handled the situation with both firmness and kindness. By November, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He stared at her for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy that brought Rosa running from the kitchen in alarm. He spun Catherine in a circle, laughing and kissing her, and declaring it was the best news he had ever received. Their son was born in July of 1883, a healthy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him James, after Catherine's father. Cole was a devoted father, constantly holding the baby and talking to him in Spanish and English and even singing lullabies in a surprisingly pleasant voice. Watching Cole with James, Catherine often thought about the strange chain of events that had brought her to this moment. If Thomas had not betrayed her, if Cole had not happened to overhear the jeweler, if she had not accepted the job at the ranch, none of this would have happened. She would not have this beautiful life, this wonderful husband, this precious son. She still wore her mother's jewelry on special occasions, and she still kept her father's locket close. But the piece she wore every day was the silver bracelet Cole had given her, the symbol of new beginnings and futures built together. In September of 1883, Catherine was in town buying supplies when she saw a familiar figure across the street. Thomas, looking even more haggard than the last time she had seen him. He noticed her at the same moment, and they stood frozen, staring at each other across the dusty road. Finally, Thomas crossed to her. "Catherine, you look well." "I am well, Thomas. Very well." She glanced at the wagon where Cole was loading supplies, James strapped securely in a carrier. Thomas followed her gaze, and something like pain crossed his face. "You got married." "I did, almost a year ago now. And a baby. I am happy for you, Catherine, truly. You deserved better than what I gave you." Yes, I did. Catherine said it without anger, just simple truth. I hope you have sorted out your life, Thomas. I am working on it. I have a job at a mine outside of town. Steady pay, nothing glamorous, but I'm staying out of trouble. He paused. I know it means nothing now, but I'm sorry for what I did. It was the worst thing I have ever done, and I regret it every day. I forgive you, Catherine said, and realized she meant it. She had been carrying anger toward Thomas for so long, but looking at him now, she felt only pity. He had thrown away something real for foolish gambles, and he would have to live with that. But she did not have to carry his burden anymore. Thomas nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. Thank you for that. Take care of yourself, Catherine. He walked away, and Catherine watched him go with a sense of closure. That chapter of her life was truly over now. Cole approached with James in his arms. Was that him, Whitmore? Yes, he wanted to apologize. I think he meant it. Are you all right? Catherine smiled up at her husband and her son. I am perfect. Let us go home. The years rolled by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Catherine and Cole had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1885, honoring Cole's lost love, and another son named Michael in 1887. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 500 head of cattle to over 1,000. They built an addition to the main house to accommodate the growing family, and Catherine turned the old office into a playroom for the children. Jack retired in 1889, and Cole promoted one of the younger ranch hands to foreman. Rosa continued cooking and managing the household, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. The cottage where Catherine had first lived became a guest house, and they often hosted visitors from Tombstone and beyond. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1892, Cole surprised Catherine with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Rosa and traveled by train, marveling at the mountains and cities and finally the glittering bay. They stayed in a grand hotel and saw the sights and ate at fancy restaurants, and it was wonderful. But Catherine found herself missing the ranch, missing the wide open spaces and the smell of desert after rain. On their last night in San Francisco, they walked along the waterfront at sunset. Cole pulled her close and said, "Would you change anything? If you could go back to that day in the jewelry shop, knowing everything that would happen, would you do it all the same?" Catherine thought about Thomas's betrayal, about the fear and desperation she had felt in those first days in Tombstone. She thought about the risk she had taken coming to the ranch, trusting a stranger who had shown her unexpected kindness. She thought about all the moments since, falling in love, getting married, having children, building a life together. "I would not change a single thing," she said, "because it all led me to you." Cole kissed her then, right there on the waterfront with the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and red. When they broke apart, Catherine touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one he had given her all those years ago. It was tarnished now, worn from daily use, but she would not trade it for all the polished silver in the world. They returned to the ranch to find the children had grown what seemed like inches in just 2 weeks. James, now 9 years old, wanted to know everything about the trip and if they had seen any ships. Sarah, 7, and already showing signs of her father's love for horses, had apparently spent most of their absence in the stables. Michael, just 5, mostly wanted his mother's attention and hugs. Catherine gathered them all close, breathing in the smell of sunshine and dust and home. This was her life now. Not the one she had imagined when she left St. Louis with Thomas all those years ago, but something infinitely better. A real life, built on honesty and hard work and love that did not waver when times got difficult. Cole joined them, his arms going around the whole family. "Everyone all right here?" he asked, and Catherine heard the contentment in his voice, the deep satisfaction of a man who had everything he needed. "We are perfect," Catherine said, and she meant it with her whole heart. The years continued to pass, each bringing new challenges and joys. Droughts came and went, cattle prices fluctuated, children grew, and sometimes drove their parents to distraction. But through it all, Catherine and Cole remained steady partners. They made decisions together, supported each other through difficulties, and never took for granted the love they had found. On Catherine's 40th birthday in 1899, her children threw her a surprise party. The house was full of neighbors and friends, people from town and the surrounding ranches. There was food and music and dancing, and Catherine felt overwhelmed by how much her life had changed in 17 years. From a lonely woman in a boarding house with nothing but an empty jewelry box to this, a full life surrounded by people who loved her. That night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Catherine and Cole sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. She was wearing all her jewelry, the sapphire earrings, the pearl necklace, the gold locket, and the silver bracelet that never left her wrist. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me that day. For caring enough to help. For giving me a life I never dreamed was possible." Cole took her hand, his fingers finding the familiar contours of the bracelet. "I am the one who should be thanking you. After Sarah died, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone. I had the ranch, and that was enough, or so I told myself. But then you came along and showed me what I was missing. You made this house a home. You gave me children and laughter and purpose beyond just working. You saved me, Catherine, just as much as I supposedly saved you." "We saved each other," Catherine corrected gently. "That is what love does." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out and cattle lowed in response. The wind whispered through the scrub brush, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Catherine thought about Thomas one last time with compassion but no regret. He had taken her jewelry, but in doing so, he had set in motion a chain of events that led her to Cole. Sometimes the worst betrayals opened doors to the best blessings. She would never say she was grateful for what Thomas did, but she could acknowledge that good had come from it in ways no one could have predicted. The jewelry pieces were just objects in the end, metal and stones. What mattered was what they represented. Connection to the past, yes, but more importantly, the love of a man who valued those connections enough to restore them. Cole had given her back her history, and in doing so, had become her future. As they finally rose to go inside, Catherine paused to look out over the ranch one more time. The main house with its additions, the barn and stables, the bunkhouse and cottage, all solid and real under the starlight, the land stretching away in every direction, harsh and beautiful in theirs. This was her home. These were her people. This was the life she had built from the ashes of betrayal, and it was more than she had ever hoped for. Cole held the door open for her, and Catherine walked inside, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, because she knew, with the certainty that comes from years of tested love, that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And that was all she needed. The end of their story was really just a continuation, each day building on the last, each year adding to the foundation of their life together. Their children would grow up and have their own adventures, their own heartbreaks and triumphs. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations. The jewelry would become heirlooms again, given to daughters and granddaughters, with stories of how they were lost and recovered, symbols of resilience and unexpected grace. But the real legacy would be the love itself, the kind that started with a stranger's compassion and grew into something unshakable. Catherine and Cole would grow old together on that ranch, watching sunsets from that porch, holding hands through joys and sorrows. And when their time finally came, they would leave behind more than land and cattle and possessions. They would leave behind proof that sometimes in the midst of betrayal and loss, love could find a way. That kindness offered without expectation of return could change lives. That the worst moments could lead to the best ones if you were brave enough to keep moving forward. Catherine fell asleep that night with Cole's arm around her and her silver bracelet cool against her wrist. She dreamed of the future. Grandchildren playing in the yard, the ranch continuing to thrive, A long life still stretched out before them, and in her dreams, as in her waking life, she was exactly where she belonged.